It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Landmines. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendo. Thanks a lot for joining us as always. Just a few days ago, I believe, it was World Press Freedom Day, and the conversation with regards to freedom of press in Nigeria is not one that a lot of people understand, not very exhaustive, and we are going to be opening up with that to understand, hopefully give us some better context as to what freedom of press actually means in Nigeria, where it stands. For a lot of people, we see these rankings, and Nigeria doesn't seem to be at the top or even anywhere near the middle with regards to freedom of press. And I think I have someone here who's going to help us, who's very well versed in that. Kasim Akinremi, who's a journalist, first of all, and a former NUJ president of the Lagos chapter. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much.
So, like I said, freedom of press, not a very funny or pleasant conversation to have here in Nigeria for a lot of people. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, obviously, because the freedom of the press means that there may be unfettered access to information and, of course, to disseminating information. But the unfettered access we're talking about also has some limitations. Because where your right ends, that's where the right over that begins. But the reality is that the role of the media is specifically specified in the Constitution. So it's a right even given by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999. Section 22 says the media is supposed to do what? Make government accountable. And another section of the Constitution also have freedom. You also have freedom of association, freedom to also express yourself. So, but within all this, yes, the provisions is there, but the reality of the job for the media is that there are three triangle challenges for the media. Reporting politics, reporting crisis, ethno-religious crisis or thereabout, and of course, reporting corruption. These are three landmines.
Why are they landmines? Because I want to understand something here, because there's arguments from a lot of sides. People say we are suffering from a hangover of the military era where there was just general fear. It wasn't a democracy. So understandably, the press couldn't have been as free as they could have been. We're 20-something years post-democracy now. Is that still the case? There's also a lot of flack that journalists get, where stories are paid for, allegedly. There's a brown envelope, for want of a better word, culture, which seems to be an open secret about how journalism here works. What is the biggest reason for this landmines existing, where it seems like there isn't enough of fairness with the reportage here?
The basic problem is understanding the role of the media itself for the society and the practitioners themselves. Because at one point, you're going to ask yourself, am I in the right profession?
Yeah.
Already in the right profession, you know what it takes. So you are going to be very careful and stick to the ethics of that profession. So there's nothing like brown envelope as far as journalism is concerned, because there is no room for gratification.
But it happens.
Well, I'm not disputing that fact, but I'm just saying that there's no room for it. So if you understand what the ethics says, there's no point for you to see, you're going to expect sometimes gratification at the end of probably an interview or probably running the program. But you can also, because media is also business. So you could have, of course, paid for news. And that's why you have agencies that have adverts and all this stuff. It's allowed. But to the extent that is now, it's impacting on giving information freely, on dissecting information freely. That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Because I have a right, for example, for channels to give me news, update me with news, information, and then educate me on what is going on, and of course entertain me. That's the right that I have as a citizen. And of course, yes, the media house is going to give it out to me. But to what extent that what I'm getting hasn't that unfettered access? To what extent am I getting it freely without some encumbrances? And that's why I told you about those landmines, because they are real. You are reporting politics, for example. I mean, either parties will accuse you of being partisan. Right? Okay, you are reporting corruption because you want to dig deep into why certain things are not really working, why some people have refused to do what they're supposed to do, and then they are getting gratification somewhere. And so the more you are digging deep on that, of course, you are not their friends. And so you've also interrogating government policies to the extent that what is the value addition for the people? And so if there's no value addition for the people, is it right for you to do this policy? Is this policy good? So if you're interrogating it deeply, there's also a problem because the people don't understand it. And if it is crisis, that is the height of it. Because if you are in the middle of that crisis, you are in trouble. And if you're also, if you also sit back, they said, it doesn't care about what is going on. They are not giving us reporting what they should report in terms of what crisis is all about. So that's why I said it's a landmine. For a journalist who thoroughly actually knows his onions and is abreast of the professional calling, obviously knows what to do. That is why I said the ethics is already there. That's why the code of conduct of this job is there. So once you guide those jealously, of course, you are good to go.
You're painting a picture of almost sort of where do we go from here? It looks like, there's landmines and there's no way to walk around it. We all know what the situation of the country is right now. Insecurity is a big deal.
Yes.
And like you've mentioned, crisis would always be front cover news, unfortunately, in this part. So reporting it is also very important, especially in this era of fake news where we're not always sure what is right and what is wrong. Is this a Nigerian issue with journalists being caught in the middle when reporting politics, like you said, or crisis, or is it a global issue? Because it seems like we see these things all over the world, and sometimes you kind of understand what's happening. Here, you almost have to dig as an individual, not even as a journalist, to find the news.
I mean, it's all over. It's global. The challenges I'm talking about is global, but the extent to which each society handles this, or people understand this, differs. If it's about democracy, yes, there's right to fair hearing. And as a journalist, you want to balance your story. So there is part of the code of conduct is sefairness, right? Get the facts right. And of course, you have done all this. You have been fair to both parties and you have your facts right. But the reality seems that, look, people understand that what is facts to you could not be facts to me.
But facts should be facts.
The facts, but what is the facts? Right, and that is why you see, if you look at a popular example where facts are sacred, comments are free. That is the we had to do it to that crucible of understanding what our role should be.
We're being joined now online by Moses Omogena, who's also a journalist. Moses, I don't know, I'm sure you've been listening to the conversation here, but I want to get your opinion on, our 20-something years of democracy so far. We even got a Freedom of Information Bill at some point in the last couple of years. How would you rate the run of journalism? Are we doing better than we were in 1999, or have things gotten worse for journalists with regards to freedom of speech? Freedom of press, I beg your pardon.
Thank you very much, Ebuka. I really do think that we've gone progressive. By extension, I think we're doing much better because of the array of tools that we have been open to. Social media, for one, right? We've gone past where, the access to news, the access to authenticity, the access to information was only made available to selected few. But right now, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, every man on the street, has a stake in giving out what he or she considers to be new, right? Everybody has a voice. Everybody has a platform now. So that in itself makes it difficult for stakeholders and governments in this sense to clamp down on the voice of people. And I think that is a very progressive thing. Listening to, I'm not sure what his name is, your guest in the studio. I came in quite a bit.
Mr. Kasim Akinremi.
Mr. who? Mr. Kazim. Yeah. I really do think that as a journalist, there has to be a difference between what is factual and what is true. Because something can in fact be factual, but not necessarily be true, right? And in fact that the devil behind or whoever a stakeholder in behind might in fact be tailoring, the metrics. But the truth is that he or she has an agenda, right, to cloud you from what really he or she wants you not to know or what to know. So there has to be a dismiss to work with that mindset. When we talk about being objective, being authentic, being fair, yes, it's great. But the truth is, every media organization, every media house, every journalist has a sense of loyalty, right? Everybody has a self-interest. To me, the true test of loyalty, the true test of objectivity for journalists is when you're able to stand for the truth, even when the bricks are hitting your own foot. Take, for example, tomorrow, if Ebuka were to be rocked by a scandal, is Robbie Miles going to carry it? That's the question. Is Robbie Miles going to be objective in dishing out the story? That's the true test of objectivity. So yeah, that's really what I'm going to say in this regard.
Okay, you kind of broke off a few times, but I think I got a bit of what you were trying to say there. But you talked about sort of being loyal to to whatever sides they were, and I want to talk about NSAS, the protests that rocked the nation in October. The media, interestingly, seemed to be in a position of sort of government was not happy with the media. The people were also not very happy with the media. The media was on its own, basically. People were saying, you guys are not reporting what's happening. People sort of turned to being their own reporters. Government, on the other hand, was fining stations here and there and, sort of trying to control what was coming out. How do you think journalists and the media did, in a time like that? And how do you handle a situation like that to be fair enough for sort of both sides to see what is, like you say, the truth?
I think when it comes to the NSAS movement and the NSAS reportage, I think we also need to understand, what form of media was being used. I think social media, should really be given credence here, because social media during the NSAS movement seemed to have the loudest noise, and that's what the world heard, right? Traditional forms of media, TV, was not so keen on reporting, it got to a point where it was social media who now gave traditional forms of media the courage and the boldness to take a stand. Of course, when international forms of media and journalists also came in on board, right? As popular as it may seem, there were still some traditional forms of media that were still, on the side of the government that were still saying, the numbers of people killed were exaggerated and all that. You and I know those media houses. I'm not going to call it. But yeah, but I think that when it comes to media in the NSAS rhetoric, social media was really a job well done, as opposed to traditional forms of media.
Yeah. I'll come back to you, Moses. Let me come back to you, Dr. Kasim, now. And he's talked about social media there a few times, and I want to get your opinion on, you're a traditional journalist, you've done this job for a while, you've even run the NUJ in Lagos. Do you find social media as a help to journalism, or do you find that, like I mentioned earlier, fake news has become a thing now since the US president, made it a mantra, where you have to sort of clarify things and you're sort of fighting social media. Is it an aid to the media, you think, or not?
Ebuka, freedom comes with responsibility. And that's why you see a line of departure between state broadcasters and private, media organizations. You need to understand it very, very well. And social media, yes, they've come to, assist, being part of what we call adjunct of the press.
Yeah.
But the reality is those who are, active in social media, most of them are not trained journalists. And so they do not understand those responsibility of a journalist. That it is not in your best interest to cause chaos. It is not in our interests for these countries to go aflame. Right. And so when you're going to process the information, you must understand that that information you're going to process is for the good of the people. So if the information you are processing is not for public interest and public good, then that is a dilemma. And that's why it seems that the answers was the media, we also burnt our fingers. 3 media houses were on flames at that time, were on fire at that time. And as the chairman of NUJ then, I know my responsibility. I have to go out to see how do I, help my members. Some of them were thrown out of charge of job for a while because those media houses couldn't pay their bills. And they couldn't even run efficiently. And before you also need to understand the ownership structure of the media is key. And so when people discuss media, society doesn't seem to appreciate what is all
of the
about.
Dynamics that come into play.
What the society is interested in, give us the news unfiltered.
As they should.
Either you process it or you don't process it as that. But what is the end product of giving out your information? That's why I mentioned public good and public interest.
Yeah.
So of what public good is it going to do if we decide to show where people were instigating people to violence? So you are going to encourage other people to do that. And that's exactly the fallout of that NSAS. And that's where you can see where the panel is going through all this now. They are sieving through all the evidences. And we can also see glaringly where the fault lines are. That's why I said we are the problem.
You mentioned violence there, and I want to talk about, because we're going to talk about freedom of the press without talking about safety.
That's absolutely correct.
I mean, even here at Channels, we've lost a colleague a few months ago as a result of, things we shouldn't maybe talk about now. But is the Nigerian journalist safe? And who and why is that, if you don't think they are? Because there's a belief. Like I talked about rankings at the start of the show. Nigeria ranks abysmally when it comes to safety of journalists. Yeah. Why is that?
Yeah. For journalists to be safe, you are as good as your last bar line. And so your safety first. And how do you ensure that you are safe? First of all, wherever you are going to cover an assignment, you have to think of your safety. Where is it good for me to take these shots? So I won't be part of that story at the end of the day. It's important. Okay, but even before I go, am I also insured? Do I have a life insurance? So in the course of this, because every profession has its own risk, we need to understand that. And that is the essence of insurance. So that is why the NUJ has an insurance scheme. We also encourage media organizations to have insurance for their workers.
That's very
But is it working? That's another issue entirely, another conversation entirely. And so once you do that, you have some tracking devices that's also monitor where you are. I mean, this example happened to Khashoggi. Look, the saving grace was the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
So how many Nigerian journalists can afford to have that?
Let me just get a final word from Moses. Moses, who do you think, I don't want to say takes a bigger blame, but where does the buck stop, with regards to fairness of dissemination? Because government will always be in the conversation with regards to policy and all of that. But are journalists also doing enough, you think?
I really think it's 50-50. I think while the government has its role to play, I also think that I think slightly the big chunk of responsibility comes from the journalists, because then it's hard to be fair, it's hard to be credible in today's world, right? And really, when Mr. Kazim was talking about welfare and all that, I thought that was a very interesting side, because then how do you expect a journalist to be fair or to carry his or her job effectively when he's not even paid for his job as being a journalist in the first place, right? You and I know that there are media organizations where journalists are working without salaries, months of salaries unpaid. And of course, when a wealthy senator or a House of Rep member offers a brown envelope, he takes it at the slightest opportunity. At the end of the day, he needs to survive. So I think that in itself is also a very it's a dilemma that needs to be tackled. That the welfare, a journalist goes out with high chips on their shoulders, knowing that regardless of how much is being thrown at me, I would do my job, with the utmost sense of ethics, right? And it takes a lot of grace and discipline to do that, So yeah, when you talk about, who takes the bigger chunk, I don't think that's what we should. I really don't think anybody has a chunk of blame here. I just think that everybody needs to play their roles effectively. Government needs to safeguard the fundamental human rights of every human being, regardless of whether you're a journalist or not. and uphold constitutional acts as freedom of information, for example, stipulates. And of course, every journalist needs to also be properly trained from time to time to remind them that you have a role to play. You are a fourth essence of the realm, and so you have a very significant role to play in society and hold that to a high esteem. So yeah, I really think that's where we need to go.
Well, thank you very much, Moses. Thank you very much, Dr. Kasim. I mean, this conversation, I think, needs probably 2 hours to dig into, because there's so many questions I have about investigative journalism and, what does the future hold? But unfortunately, we're out of time. Now, thank you very much, sir, for being here today. Thank you. And hopefully we talk about happier things when next year here. We'll take a quick break now. I'll be right back. Please don't go away.